Good morning. I'd like to call the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for Tuesday, October 20th, 2015 to session. And the first item is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comments. And I've got 4 people so far signed up for public comment, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. And the first person is Liz Killiam, followed by Don Morrill. So Liz, if you'll come up and state your name and where you're from for the record, and then 3 minutes will start after that.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Liz Killiam. I live in Veneta, 25125 Allure Avenue. So I'm working with a group of citizens. We call ourselves the Veneta Crime Watch Group, and we're starting an initiative to create a policing district in the Fern Ridge area. Right now, essentially, Veneta already has a contract with the Sheriff's Office for an enhanced policing, but it's not enough for just Veneta because we're grouped with a lot of other cities, Notai, Walton, Alador, Crow. So whatever grounds we might be making in Veneta, they sort of move out into the greater Fern Ridge area, and it's impacting all of us. I don't have to tell you guys that Lane County has been suffering. Our criminal justice system is broken. Everything from having enough police to arrest, to prosecution because the DA doesn't have enough money either, to trying to fund our jail. I mean, look how hard it was for us just to get our levy so we could fund the jail beds. What we've created and what is going to be presented to you is essentially what I think the entire Lane County criminal justice system should look like. It's what it was meant to look like. But what we're doing is enhancing our own area because that's what we're left with, because the Sheriff's Office can't patrol in the way that it should be. So what I would like to see you guys do once the presentation is over is to fully support us in the resources that are going to be needed to get this going. It's very important to us. I'm a mom, first and foremost, living in the Veneta area, and I don't like what I see. I don't like what's going on in my own street, and I want to see an enhanced policing district in our area. We're going to be having town halls, 6 or 8 of them that we have scheduled, to explain this to the community. And so far what I have heard is that there's very positive reactions coming from the citizens. A lot of it's about cost. What is it going to cost to do this? I think once people realize what they're going to be getting for their money, they're going to be fully supporting this. And I'm hoping at the end of our town halls, that's what's going to happen. So we need your support to get it going. And one of the biggest, I think, points is that if this is successful and we can get this going, passed on the ballot, and then passed on the ballot, is what we have created here, the Citizens Initiative, what we have created can work in all of the communities in Lane County, and I think that's what's going to be the biggest impact, because they can also use the infrastructure that we're going to create to have another policing district, an enhanced policing district essentially is what it is, in the other smaller communities that don't have their own police force. So thank you.
Thank you. Don Morrill, followed by Terry Nye.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Don Morrill. I live in Veneta, Oregon as well. I'm also a member of the Veneta Crime Watch. We come before you guys today to ask for your assistance in trying to better ourselves and our communities and the people that we all know and live next to. We are, like everybody else, tired of the crime, tired of the revolving door in the Lane County jail system. We're trying to do something proactive to help our communities and bring the rest of our communities up around us instead of just being worried about ourselves. We're trying to bring up our neighborhoods, our people, everybody around us. This policing district has a very good chance of bolstering our economy because our crime rate should go down because people actually are held accountable again. So I'm a local business owner as well. Everybody I've talked to has had wonderful things to say about the idea here. Now we just need to get your backing so we can start implementing the the ways to make it happen. So we are all here to ask you for your insight and your help to bring this together and bolster our community and be a role model for other areas to follow as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Nye, followed by Aaron Brown.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Terry Nye, a resident of the rural area outside of Veneta, also Fire Chief of Lane Fire Authority. Lane Fire Authority's footprint is 276 square miles, and it's probably, we haven't seen the final proposed footprint for the community policing district, but it's going to be fairly similar. Probably we cover a few areas they don't, but nevertheless, there's a very large overlap. So I'm here both as a citizen that lives in the rural area outside of Veneta, and also as the Chief of Lane Fire Authority, because we are very dependent upon the Fire Authority. In many of our call types, we cannot go into a scene until we have law enforcement support. And it's very frustrating for us to have to wait 20 or 30 minutes for the nearest sheriff's officer to come from basically here to Veneta so that we can go in on an overdose that we know is suffering from a severe medical need that we could treat, but we can't until we get there. And having dedicated patrol deputies 24/7, 365 in most of my districts would be a great service we offer the fire district. As a citizen living in the rural area, just outside of Veneta, I'm well aware of the crime problems that can exist just outside of the city limits, because the city can provide a higher level of police patrol than is available in the outskirts of the area. I told the city council last week that trying to control the crime within the city and not control the crime as well just outside the city is akin to having a non-peeing section of the swimming pool. I stand by that analogy because the pollution, if you will, infiltrates back into the city outside of it. So I'd really like to see this policing district go forth. I would ask for your support, Commissioners, to give us the means that we need to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron Brown.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for allowing me to come up here. I am the superintendent of the Crow-Applegate-Lorraine School District, and I'm a part of this special district. It doesn't involve my whole district, but I am very excited about this plan. When I was presented this, it was one that I thought was very well thought out and included education in the whole process. Not only am I looking at the safety of my schools and thinking about the Fern Ridge School District safety, as you all are well aware of our issues that we've had, especially at UCC and so forth. It would be wonderful to have a resource officer at our schools and have an educational program and that would affect all our students. In working in past districts with resource officers, I can see the benefits and how our young generation will look up to our officers and will help police themselves as a whole. And so I'm very much in support of this. I had a board meeting last night. I know my board members are very much in support of this, and I love the ideas of a youth transition program that we can help all our young kids as we try and get them to grow up. So that's all I have to say. We are in support of it, the Crow-Applegate-Lorraine School District. So thank you very much. Thank you.
That's everyone I had signed up for public comment. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board this morning? You'll step up to the podium there, and if you'll give your name and where you're from for the record.
My name is Brad Lilly. I live in Veneta as well. I'm not really much on public speaking, but I think this is important enough to get me up here and talk. Basically, I just wanted to point out that in the proposal you're going to see in a little bit, it includes a couple of resource officers and also expanded deputies in town. And when I was in high school, I went to Thurston, and when I was a senior, we had the shooting there. And basically, I just wanted to say that you never really think it's going to happen at your school. We were lucky enough to have a quick response, and along with some people that were inside the school helping out. But if the same thing was to happen in the Veneta or outlying areas, that I think the result would be a lot worse than what we had. I think that basically with the lack of deputies in town or having to wait for somebody else to come, just the result could be horrific. So although it's not very common, it does happen, and I'd just really like for us to be prepared for it. So that's really all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else wish to address the board? Seeing none, then we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comment and/or other issues and remonstrance. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to say thank you very much to the folks who came to the board this morning and provided public comment. First of all, a couple things. I think you're really doing this right. I really do, and I really appreciate it. I think in order for something like this to succeed, it needs to be citizen-driven. So I think that's important. One of the things I want to just share with you is when the city of Springfield went out and began the process of enhancing their public safety system, which meant adding more patrol, actually more firefighters, and eventually building the municipal jail. That conversation actually started back when we had a police chief named Bill DeForest. And Chief DeForest, that goes back in the mid-'90s when I was actually on the budget committee, and he began having this conversation. Then when Jerry Smith became our police chief, it went from the patrol side to all of a sudden, yes, patrol, but also it was about the potential of building this municipal jail. At first it was 50 beds. Now, of course, as you know, it's 100 beds. But one of the things I'm going to make sure you all understand is that you don't know how many times after I was elected mayor, and when I personally began really pushing this idea over and over again, you have no idea how many times I was told it can't be done. I mean, over and over and over again, I was told it can't be done. I use those as fighting words personally, so when you hear those, just use those as fighting words as much as anything, because while you talk about wanting the board's backing, honestly, I think it's going to be your backing, and it's going to be the folks who really want to see this happen. Going out and having the conversation, the fact you're going to have town halls is fantastic, and just really talk to the citizens in that area about how important this will be for your as far as enhancing public safety. So I really appreciate that. And to Brad's comments, I want to say thank you for bringing that up. The Thurston shooting was of course, now it's off anybody's radar, because at the time it was the worst high school shooting in the country. Now it's not even discussed anymore. A couple things happened there. First of all, you had incredibly brave students who stepped in. I mean, honestly, were willing to, in a sense, not thinking, but their lives could have been seriously sacrificed to stop the shooter. And the response time was less than 5 minutes. And in fact, I will never forget, Chief Murphy told me that when the Fire and Life Safety were there, that all patients were transported to both Peace Health and Mackenzie-Willamette within less than an hour. But because we had a coordinated public safety system already in place. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I think you're right on where you are right now, but I think more importantly, thank you for the comments, and I wish you the best on having that dialogue with the citizens that are involved in this, that you're wanting to work with and will be involved in this district. Saying the board's backing, okay, it's your backing. Your backing is going to be the most critical going forward. And so just wanted to share those. I've been through this a few times, and I really think you're on the right track, and I appreciate those comments you've shared with us this morning. Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too wanted to say thank you to the folks that came to speak today. A couple weeks ago, I was blessed to meet with Steve and get kind of a preview of this proposal. So I'm very excited about the conversation today, and as somebody that's been personally driven to try to improve public safety in Lane County as a whole, this I think has some real potential to be the model, as what was stated earlier today in public comments, that can be duplicated. And it's not just a little piecemeal thing. It is really a comprehensive proposal that, addresses all the areas where we're lacking. So whether it's district attorneys or, patrol officers or jail beds or the resource officers, it's really something that is a complete package that's going to improve safety in this area. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and you've already got one supportive commissioner for sure. So thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank the people that came in today to talk about a public safety district around Veneta. And for me, this goes back many years when Sheriff Clements and I were involved in an effort in the Marcola area. Sheriff Clements at the time reviewed all the election statistics for Lane County and found that the Marcola area was one of the most supportive areas for previous jail and public safety and patrol and other public safety measures, and identified, I think it was on the fire district boundaries, might have been the school district boundaries, one of the two, that would be a place to try out this idea of public safety district for enhanced services. I believe it was limited to patrol only and not to patrol, jail, drug and alcohol issues, school officers, etc. I think it was just pretty narrowly drawn on that topic. The voters, the Board of Commissioners did put it out for vote. The voters did turn it down. But I've always thought it was a great idea, and of course I thought it would be a better idea if it was initiated by the community. And so in this instance, where you're going out there with a self-identified need in your own community, not coming from us, not coming from the sheriff, not coming from the county administrator, but really the community identifying this a problem, a lack of resources, a need for some additional help. To me, it has a much better chance of flying, and I agree with Commissioner Stewart. You have a supporter in me for trying this out. I don't know exactly the extent of it. It doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned, whether you narrowly tailor it to law enforcement, adult crime only, or whether you broaden it to jail services, youth services, preventative services, child enforcement, and other services that are equally underfunded, and maybe we don't hear about it as much because it's typically state function, but still it's a huge need throughout the state, and especially rural areas. So to me, this has got great potential, and I'm looking forward to the details. For me, the details aren't nearly as important as the community support and your willingness to come forward and say this is something that that we can try to help you with in a very small way, but you're really the people that are driving it, and I think it's a great model for the rest of the county. Thanks.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to particularly point out you, Mr. Lilly, thanks for stepping forward. I understand what it's like to get to the mic when you don't do it very often. You did a really good job of summing up the things that the other four folks said. You brought everything together, and you brought a little bit of a personal touch to it. Not a little bit, a great deal of a personal touch. When you talked about being at Thurston High School, you probably know that Commissioner Lycan was on the Springfield City Council at the time, and he and I have talked quite often about the events surrounding that and the events of the following days, and it was horribly traumatic. And talking about that and the general approach to public safety is something that we need to pay strict and close attention to. And considering a special district in the Veneta area is a part of our greater public safety effort, a public safety effort that involves the Sheriff's Department, municipal police departments, our jail, and our district attorney. And you probably know, in fact, it was mentioned, Ms. Killam, you mentioned that we passed the jail levy. And we did indeed pass the jail levy. Before the jail levy, we had 125 beds open to people who had committed crimes, some of them violent crimes, quite often crimes with guns or other weapons. After the jail levy, we had promised that we'd open 255 beds, and as of July 1st of this year, we had 256 beds. Today, we have 297 beds. So we've actually, come close to greater than double the amount of beds that we have, but that still doesn't make you feel safe when you're just outside, as the fire chief said, just outside of regular coverage, just outside of a municipal line. And it's akin to, I won't say what you said, but I fully understand the concept. If we have the same situation in the River Road area where we have island annexations where people across the street don't know who's going to respond to a call for service, a call for some help. And if they're inside the city, it comes a lot quicker than it does for people outside of the city. As you know, our Sheriff's Department is stretched very, very thin indeed. But more significantly, or at least equally as significantly, our DA is stretched thin too. So as we identify more crimes, arrest more violators of violent crimes, including gun crimes, we have to be aware that sometimes, because of the caseload that's presented to our district attorney, she and her staff are not able to prosecute some crimes that need to be prosecuted. So it's all a part of the larger public safety issue that we have to pay attention to, and making certain that our own homes are protected, as this initiative that you're undertaking would do. We'll also have to be aware that it's a part of a larger picture, and if we do protect our own homes, if we send the criminals to jail, or if we send them downtown to get booked, and the DA isn't going to prosecute them, then it's really, that's where the revolving door that was mentioned happens, is that if we don't have prosecution available. We've done a good part, and the people of Lane County stepped up to open more jail beds, but it's all, once again, a part of a larger public safety picture that we have to pay attention to. I'm in full support of this, by the way. You heard one commissioner say that you have one commissioner in support. I'll say you have a second commissioner in support. It's something that I'll pay close attention to, listen to every detail, and point out conditions that may arise in my mind so that you're able to address them. Not to stop you, but to address conditions that may come up. Looking forward to hearing the presentation. Mr. Chair, there's one other thing I'd like to mention under not response, but items. We are undergoing right now Operation 365. We have a plan to house all unhoused veterans in Lane County. Mr. Mokrahajski's done a very good job of allowing me in certain areas to have a latitude to step out and work alongside Mayor Kitty Piercy and a great many other people on Lane County staff and on city staff and on other city staff to put veterans in houses. I'd like to particularly call out to landlords in the area who are doing what they can to relax first, last, and security payments in order to let veterans get into homes, and in some cases relax what would be conditions that would not allow them to rent from them based upon past infractions that have been satisfied. So right now we're on target. 365 veterans by the end of this year is what our target is. As of right now, we've housed 290 veterans in Lane County, and we're going to hit the goal of 365 before the end of the year. And at that point, we can officially say that functionally we have reduced veterans' homelessness to zero. Doesn't mean there are no homeless veterans, but we've achieved functional zero. We're moving forward with it, and Mr. Mokrahajski, thank you for your participation in that. Thanks to the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and thank you to everybody who's participated in making sure that we don't have homeless veterans on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to spend a minute to thank the folks from the Fern Ridge area for coming out and speaking to the board in public comment. And I hope I'm not stealing some part of your presentation, Steve, but I just, this past weekend, there was a report of shots fired in Veneta. And a brand new deputy to the Veneta Patrol, Deputy Mays, was on duty, I think by himself. And we were fortunate that there just happened to be an OSP patrol officer within 5 minutes of Veneta. Otherwise, the response to that requires backup. Normally, the response time for backup in Bonita can be anywhere upwards of 45 minutes because our next deputy may be patrolling Oak Ridge at the time or may have just finished responding to a call down in Cottage Grove or Florence. This is really a critical item, and having that 2 deputies on duty at all times and having that backup for those calls. One only has to think back less than, about a month ago, where we had a deputy that was actually shot in the line of duty, Deputy Olson. And we excused the fire chief for having his alarm go off in his pocket. Everybody else we asked to silence their cell phones, but it's that, you think of incidents like that, and in that case there was backup there, and we still had a deputy wounded in the line of duty. So, this is such a critical item, and I do want to call out, I've been talking with Steve and the group for a long time. I was there when they presented to the city of Bonita, and the part that really is interesting to this is the tie-in to almost a restorative justice piece in the youth corps, and having that, school resource officer and then a resource deputy to run a work crew that also will potentially run a youth corps in the Fern Ridge area. And in addition, that tie to the helping people that are in crisis, maybe not necessarily criminal, so they don't end up taking up valuable resources in our public safety system, but extending the Cahoots van and the Cahoots response out to the Fern Ridge area will kind of keep those folks out of the criminal justice system and maybe get them some of the mental health help and addiction treatment help that they need versus ending up in jail. So I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into this, and I'll echo all the rest of the commissioners. It's great that it's the citizens that it went through studying what do we really need? Where do we need to go from here? And it's the citizens bringing this forward is so important. So I want to thank you all for coming today. And if there's no further comments from the board, we'll move on to our next item, and which is emergency business. Is there any emergency business today?
No.
Then we'll move on to consent calendar, which is items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and be enacted in one motion. And if folks want to see the detail on the items in consent calendar, they can go to our website and they can click on view material for each item to see the board packet. You have a motion on the consent calendar.
I wanted to have a separate discussion and vote on the fair matter with the ice hockey. Just have a separate vote on that. We don't have to have staff here. Just want to say some things and have another vote on that.
All right. I'll pull that now. I wish you'd mentioned that in adjustments to agenda. So which item is that? D3.
D3.
D3?
Yeah.
Okay. So do we have a motion for the rest of the consent calendar without item D3? Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar as amended, removing item D3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those approved, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So item D3, which is Order 1510-20-07, in the matter of extending the Hockey Oregon license agreement for the use of the Fairgrounds Ice Arena through April 30, 2016. Commissioner Sorensen.
I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of this, and that I'm glad that we're able to keep the ice arena open and available for use by community members and the ice hockey program. And I'm really glad to see the fair staff work with the ice hockey people to make sure that that happens.
So is there a motion to approve that order?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say go Generals.
Go Generals.
Go Generals. Nice. Motion passes unanimously. So moving on to item 6A, Public Works discussion and action in the matter of accepting and authorizing county administrator to execute associated documents for a $200,000 loan from Oregon Business Development Department for environmental cleanup of county-owned property identified as map number 1703-3113, tax lot 5900, commonly known as McHale's Cleaners.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich, members of the board. The matter before you this morning is to consider accepting a $200,000 loan from the Oregon Business Development Department for the remediation of the McHale's Cleaners property. To give a brief synopsis of where we are at the moment, back in January, I presented to the board for up to a $400,000 grant from the Oregon Business Development Department. And we submitted that, and what they came back with was essentially, we'll give you, the county, a $200,000 grant, which has been awarded and is in the process of being signed by the county administrator. But then the other half of it, they didn't do it all in a grant. It was going to be a $200,000 loan. And the terms of the loan are essentially, it doesn't have to be repaid for 2 years or until the property sells. There's no interest accruing during that 2-year term. And it was all constructed to mirror the expected time frame for the cleanup of the property. So essentially, that when the property sells, then the loan would have to be repaid. The county can extend the loan for up to 2 years. There would be 1% interest at that point in time after the initial 2-year period. Again, to give some background, we are working with the DEQ on this. The DEQ is going to contribute $200,000 to the cleanup. So we would use the grant funds first, then the DEQ funds, and then if there's still more work to be done, we would start accessing the loan funds. And that's essentially what is before you this morning. And I just wanted to say one more quick thing as far as the progress. It's been a couple of weeks now, but the building has been demolished. State and company had the contract, and there was very few hiccups with very minor disruption to the neighboring businesses, essentially the Kiva and the public library. So the building is down. The grant is in the process of being signed by the county administrator, and hopefully by the first of the year, I will be bringing another item to you to do an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Environmental Quality, because they're going to be contributing money and essentially managing the cleanup of the property. So I will be bringing forth another item in a couple of weeks, hopefully, to review and approve that IGA.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions. Mr. Turk, I want to thank you for your hard work on this. This has been one of those items that you brought to us multiple times, and really to reach out and get, if I understand the board order correctly, you just explained a $200,000 grant. I mean, you can't get any more favorable terms on a $200,000 loan, and also the DEQ contributing. So, great job, and looking forward to getting this property cleaned up and hopefully sold, and hopefully people will use it. So, I mean, with that, it looks like you're asking for a motion to accept the...
Yes, because since the original order was just for the grant, and this is a little different item, so it needs separate approval. The grant has already been approved, and we have those funds, but yes, for the loan, it's a little different. Another approval is needed.
So with that, I'd like to move approval of accepting and authorizing the county administrator to execute associated documents for a $200,000 loan from the Oregon Business Development Department for environmental cleanup of county-owned property.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, can you do you know exactly when McHale's closed?
No, I don't recall that.
Because the part I'm going to probably vote in favor of this, but I got to tell you, I'm a little bit disappointed because of the fact that when I owned my business, I mean, we actually wrote a piece that when you use perchloroethylene, the dry cleaners of this state actually proposed a tax on ourselves. Those dollars would actually go into a specialized fund that would be used for this specific reason. And McHale's, I know at the beginning, actually paid into this, and so there should be those dollars set aside to actually do the full cleanup. So I got to tell you, I'm a little bit disappointed that the $200,000 that was in the grant level and not for the full cleanup. But I will say though, the terms in the loan are pretty darn good. And I think where the property's located after the cleanup, that's going to be a very prime piece of property to sell. I think that'll be off the rolls really quickly, and I think that's probably that gives me a little bit ease on that, because I think after this we're going to get our money back no matter what here, and because of the location and so I believe that'll go quickly. But I'd love to be talking to DEQ right now and giving them a piece of my mind, and because I think they're off personally. But I will echo Commissioner Stewart, and I just want to say thank you very much. You did really good work on this, and I think again, I think where the property's located, I think we're going to be fine going through this process, and the terms of the loan are pretty outstanding. So thank you for the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
So just for those in the audience that might be kind of scratching their heads, the county inherited a mini Superfund site when McHale Cleaners owner failed to pay taxes, and we had to do a tax foreclosure on this property. So that's how we ended up owning this property and then ultimately being responsible for the cleanup on it. Fortunately, though, with the great work of our staff, we're not paying for that out of taxpayers' direct funds. The state is supporting a lot of the cleanup. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Just for the record, it's 1060 Olive Street. That's adjacent to the small natural food store there.
Yes, the Kiva is on one side and the Eugene Public Library is on the other side.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I've just put it in perspective looking at the map here. Mr. Turk, thank you for your work on this, and it's kind of a key piece of property downtown Eugene. It's kind of almost in the dead geographic center of downtown Eugene, so it's going to be good to get this on the economic development charts. Thank you.
Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Turk.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Steve.
So next we have item 6B, which is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1314 in the matter of co-adopting the Coburg Transportation System Plan for application within the urbanizable area outside the Coburg city limits, but within the city of Coburg urban growth boundary, and adopting savings and severability clauses. And looks like we have Lindsay Eckner, not Lydia, but...
No, I'm not Lydia, but I'm here on her behalf. And I'm just here to request that the board read the title into the record for the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for November 3rd at 1:30 p.m.
Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the first reading and set the second reading on and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1314 for November 3rd here at Harris Hall at 1:30. It's in the matter of co-adopting the Coburg Transportation System Plan for application within the urbanizable area outside the Coburg city limits, but within the city of Coburg urban growth boundary, and adopting the savings and severability clauses.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to item 6C, which is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1315 in the matter of co-adopting amendments to the Coburg Comprehensive Plan, including adopting the Coburg Urbanization Study Update, expanding the urban growth boundary for industrial and residential land needs, redesignate land from rural residential and agricultural to traditional, medium, and high-density residential, light industrial, and mixed-use plan designations, adopting corresponding amendments to the official Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, and adopting savings and severability clauses. Ms. Eichner.
Thank you, Commissioners. Today, staff requests that, the same as the last item, that we request a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance and set a second reading and public hearing for November 3rd at 1:30 p.m.
Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for ordinance PA 1315 for setting the public hearing for November 3rd in Harris Hall at 1:30.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Eichner.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7A, County Council announcements. I will note that there is no executive session today. Are there any other announcements from County Council?
No, Chair. No.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to County Administration. Item A, announcements. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Just a few items here I thought I would update you on. First, a couple weeks ago, I shared with you an opportunity. I had to have lunch with the Human Services staff. And last week, I had an opportunity to meet with our Human Services management team and then tour their operations, and then also meet with our Public Health management team and tour their operations at the Charlton building. So I want to just share a quick overview, as I know the board appreciates our Public Health division and the great services provided there in emergency preparedness, our prevention and health promotion program, environmental health. And I will note on environmental health, a really innovative and creative approach that was developed by our environmental health staff to create an online food handling testing program. And we now have agreements with around 35 counties throughout the state that use our online food handling testing program as their testing program, and they link to it on their websites. And we're able to collect $2 of the $10 that those communities charge their local residents for. We collect $2 of the $10 for Lane County as an administrative fee. And we actually collect 10 of the $10 in Multnomah County, because Multnomah is the one county that we do not have an agreement with, yet many of the residents and businesses in Multnomah County actually use our food handling testing online program to get their certification. And we collect about $800,000 per year through that program. So a great example of innovation that was created at the staff level by our outstanding environmental health team there, and again leveraging funds that are coming from largely from other counties to support programs in Lane County. And I would say that, you know, one of the real benefits there is we're able to keep our fees for our local businesses and residents down for what we charge restaurants and other businesses in the community for environmental health services, because we leverage those outside dollars. So really outstanding work there. In addition, our communicable disease and immunization program, and I will share, I know the commissioners had an opportunity to attend the health fair, and I was at a conference in Seattle when that was happening. So last week when I toured the communicable disease and immunization program, I mentioned to one of the nurses that I had not yet got my flu shot, and they pulled me aside and said, okay, well, we'll give you your flu shot right now. Sat me down, and I filled out the paperwork, and I got my flu shot right there. And so it's a good reminder for all of us as we head into flu season to make sure that you have your flu shot. And they just do an outstanding job there in our communicable disease and immunization program. The Vital Records section, the Women, Infant, and Children nutrition program, and maternal and child health home visiting. And I will say that about 50% of all infants born in Lane County are born into WIC families, into the WIC program. About 1,900 infants are served annually in our WIC program in Lane County. So great work there. And then I will say of the around $12 million in expenses for our public health program, we leverage about $2.7 million in state and federal support. So again, a good example of how we're using local resources to leverage state and federal funding for outstanding programs. I also want to share with you, as the board just approved a lease agreement, a 5-year lease agreement for a new Lane County Employee Health Clinic at 4725 Village Plaza Loop. This is a clinic that we are working on opening for our employees, their dependents, and our retirees in Lane County, around 4,000 individuals in our community. And this is consistent with our budget message and process that we went through for the current fiscal year in moving to a self-funded health insurance plan and gaining greater control over our health care costs in Lane County. One of the big steps in gaining control of our costs is to open a clinic, and so we want to incentivize and create opportunities for our employees to participate in that. There will be services, primary care services, chronic condition coaching, prevention services, and lab services at that clinic that will be staffed by 1.5 full-time equivalent nurse practitioners and a full-time equivalent medical assistant. And it's an outstanding opportunity for us to continue to invest in the health and wellness of our employees, and again, make sure that we're getting the most out of our outstanding, limited number of employees, but outstanding quality employees that we have, and then also controlling the costs for health insurance in our organization and for our taxpayers. We're excited about that, and as that clinic opens and we have data that we collect on aggregate data around the number of individuals that we're seeing and the types of health issues that we're dealing with and cost control and improvement of health, we'll share that with the board and with the public. Also want to mention last Thursday, we had an equity summit. We have 2 equity summits each year in Lane County. These are opportunities for our employees to attend either a spring and or a fall equity summit and learn about and engage in conversations about really important issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, and access in our organization and our community. We had an outstanding speaker for the second time, Professor Eric Gervin, who's a professor in the law school at the University of Oregon, spoke for 4 hours and engaged in conversations with about over 60 of our employees on implicit bias. And it was the second conversation we've had this year on implicit bias. And so we'll continue that, and you'll hear more next week from Mr. Rickoff and myself around our detailed equity plan that we're proposing for Lane County. We spent the better part of the past year working on that, and we're really excited about moving forward with our equity plan. And finally, I wanted to just share with the board that we have an invitation from the Eugene Mission to do a tour of their facilities and operations, and so we'll be working. We talked about it this morning at Agenda Team, and we'll be working to schedule a tour for all 5 commissioners at the same time. We'll notice that appropriately and provide an opportunity for all of us to go and see the great operations that are happening there, and particularly as it relates to our efforts to work on issues related to poverty and homelessness in our community, to learn from what the mission is doing and see how we can partner with them to solve challenges of poverty and homelessness. That's all I have, Mr. Chair, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mokrzycki? Seeing none, we have a 10 a.m. time certain, so I'm going to jump down to Commissioners' business and announcements. Announcements from Commissioners. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I will do is I'll continue to provide emails and information as soon as I get it, but the right now the potential transportation package back in D.C. is very fluid, and there seems to be a strong bipartisan support. I think, as we know, Congressman DeFazio is the ranking member in the House Transportation Committee, and so on Thursday they will be going through their markup work. That is going to be, I think it's 10 a.m. our time, so I think it's 1 o'clock their time. I'll double check on that. Mary Stern from AOC was on a conference call with NACO yesterday, and so right now it's while the Transportation Committee seems to be working in a very bipartisan way, moving this forward. As we know, the funding piece falls to the House Ways and Means Committee, which is currently chaired by Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, but also Congressman Blumenauer here from Oregon is also on that committee. So stay tuned, and we'll see what happens. But right now, I would say that I'm pretty optimistic. But of course, we know what happens in D.C. It can change. But I'm just very pleased to see that things are really moving forward in a positive way. It's a 6-year reauthorization or an authorization of a package about $325 billion. Most of that going to be dedicated to the surface transportation piece. So stay tuned. And but I would say at this point in time, it's good news that both the D's and the R's are working very well together to move this forward.
Commissioner Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tomorrow, I just wanted to let folks know, tomorrow at 4 p.m., we're going to take a moment to cut the ribbon on the Route River Trail underpass. We're at bisects with Route River Road. We should have representatives, or we're planning on having representatives from both the Weimer family and the Portman family. Those are the two folks that passed away at that intersection. So we've had some great success with the program. We've had lots of media, but tomorrow is really a thank you to our partners and the official ribbon cutting. So I'm looking forward to that at 4 p.m. And then I just wanted to also reiterate, there was a couple items on the consent calendar that, even though they're routine, I just wanted to say thank you to staff for the wellness clinic. I know that the administrators already mentioned it, but looking forward to being able to see that open and really starting to meet the savings that we've are working to achieve in our budget. So thank you for that, staff and administrator. And the second item is I also wanted to say thank you. We've already given support for it, but I'm looking forward to a partnership with the DLCD, Division of Land and Conservation Department, in working on some model code for farm and forest land. So those are two really big items that we've been working hard to, and I hate to see them put on the consent calendar, but I just want to give them a shout out that great work, staff. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair Bozovich. Just first thing, I'd like to welcome Mayor Strum, Dave Strum, to Harris Hall. Welcome here today, Mayor Strum of Cresswell. And I hope you find your logo, your city logo in front of me here to your liking. Yeah. And Mr. Mokrahajski added the logos of all cities in Lane County to the Lane County logo on the dais here, because this is a dais for all of Lane County, including all of the cities. So welcome to Harris Hall today. Good to see you. Bascom Village is a assisted housing program, low-income housing program that in northeast Eugene. It's opening today. Right now, in about 7 minutes, the grand opening of Phase 1 of Bascom Village is going to take place. Phase 1 is a St. Vincent de Paul constructed low-income housing project. If you go out there, if you have an opportunity to go out there, I was out there last Thursday evening. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very well landscaped, very well maintained, and people are going to be starting to move in there right away. The second phase is going to be a HACSA-built phase, Lane County. But the first phase was done in conjunction with Lane County. I was out there last Thursday, and during the planning stages of Bascom Village, there was a great deal of concern by the adjacent neighbors, the people who live close by, that a low-income housing project potentially would be ill-sited there for a number of reasons, in no small part because of the lack of sidewalks, the lack of a decent road to get in there and get out, and the fact that that perhaps the housing mix itself would not mix with the housing that was adjacent to it and surrounding it. All of that seems to have disappeared after the project became a reality, is built. In fact, one of the main people who spoke against it at Sheldon High School, not against it, I mean, people weren't opposed to low-income housing. Nobody stated that opinion, but it was the siting of it. One of the stronger opponents of the siting of it, in his words, said, "I saw Jesus, and I love this." And what he meant was he was enlightened by the fact that this is really, truly a great opportunity for people to access housing in a very dignified fashion. I'm not there right now. The HACSA board, 5 of the 7 members are sitting here. We're not there right now. It was planned around a Board of Commissioners meeting, but it doesn't preclude us from going out to visit Bascom Village. If you get an opportunity to go out and see it, it's absolutely stunning the way this is built. And Phase 2, the HACSA project, will be very, very similar in design. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is something that you talked about, Mr. Mokrajewski, and that is our environmental health department. Not many people realize how far and wide that spreads. You know, if there are, if they go to a taco cart downtown, for instance, our environmental health department has authorized that being open and active. In the years that I was the executive manager at Jerry's, we used to do parking lot sales, and I always had hot dog stands in the parking lot sale, sold them 2 for $1. And Lane County would come out every time we had a parking lot sale and make sure we were doing it safely. Our environmental health department is really critical in making certain that our restaurants in the area, among other things, are safe to eat in. And, you know, it's remarkable that they not only do a good job with their business, but they bring in, did you say, Mr. Mokrajewski, $800,000? $800.8 million that is brought in annually by the outreach and the certification that we provide through Lane County to other counties. So call out to the Environmental Health Department. It's a pretty amazing thing that those folks are doing, and they do once again yeoman's work. Thank you.
Any other announcements? I have a couple quick ones. I just want to announce that the Florence Regional Arts Alliance is going to have their grand opening on Friday, October 23rd, 4 to 7 p.m. at their new location, 120 Maple Street in historic Old Town Florence. Should be a nice event. And then I also might want to mention that Sandra Larson, the mayor of Veneta, just walked through the door, as well as City Manager Rick Ingham. Welcome. And then I also want to mention that I'm having my Santa Clara and Junction City versions of my community conversations this Thursday. I'll be at Wayback Burgers in Santa Clara at 12:30 to about 2 o'clock. And then I will be at the Rodeo Steakhouse in Junction City at 3 o'clock to about 4:30. And then I will be at the Junction City Community Center at 6 p.m. that evening. So if you're in the Junction City and Santa Clara area and you want to talk to your commissioner or just come say hi, come by. And then in extending that outreach, I've been asked, and I'm going to start hosting an internet radio program on Thursday afternoons at 4 o'clock. So starting on October 29th at 4 o'clock, if you go on the web and look for KRBN, and internet radio station, I will be broadcasting for about an hour. There'll even be a call-in feature to that. And then, of course, it's one of those things with the internet. It will be archived, and you can play it back later if you miss something. But I'm going to try and do that weekly as an experiment to offer folks even more ability to reach their commissioners and learn about the county or ask about various county services and help we might be able to give you. So with that, if there's Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to mention that part of what we've been doing at Lane County government to improve efficiency is to work with our performance auditor, and we put in the budget enough money to have a performance auditor. We did a big process to determine if it was going to be filled internally or appointed from the outside. We went ahead with an internal process of hiring someone to work for the Board of Commissioners and not under any specific other official, but reporting directly to the board. And that person's name is Shanda Miller. And Ms. Miller has had some Meet the Auditor events with some or all the other commissioners. And tonight, at South Eugene High School cafeteria, Ms. Miller and I are having another one of these Meet the Auditor events. It's open to the public. It's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and it's at the South Eugene High School cafeteria. And I think it'll be interesting to hear what she's been doing, what she plans to do, and how she plans to get some deliverables in terms of increased process, better process, saving money, possibly even saving taxpayer dollars, and being more efficient in the way Lane County does its work. And her audits will start rolling out as she does them, and you'll hear a lot more about them. But this is an opportunity to talk with her in a kind of a small-scale setting if people want to come and meet her and talk about her work. And, of course, they'll probably come and talk to me about what I do here as well, but the focus is really on what she's doing. Thanks.
Thank you, and that brings us right up to 10 o'clock for item 8B, which is a discussion on the formation of the Fern Ridge Public Safety District. And if, Steve, you want to bring your team up to the table here, I think we've got you ready to go with your PowerPoint. You can either sit at the table or stand at the podium. It's up to you. And I will warn you, these mics are very directional, so you need to get them aimed right at your mouth. And it's the way we keep our public record in our minutes, so please try and use the mic. So, Steve, I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us this morning. My name is Steve Reister, and I am a resident of Veneta. I have a couple of things that I want to go over before we get into the presentation. For the record, there's a number of people, a good number of people that have been putting in countless hours in bringing this all together. We are not at a point where we have all of the answers. That's why we're here asking for help. We are considering our proposal very much so fluid in that we're still looking for fruit. We're looking to see what is possible, what is not possible. We're looking to see and hear from the residents and the greater community of the Fern Ridge area, which in our plan covers Crow, Veneta, Elmira, Walton, Notai, and Elvador. That said, just in case any of you believe and or what you hear and what you read from the media, I wanted to set a record straight real quick, and that is, this is not Reister's proposal. This is the Veneta Crime Watch Group's proposal. Having said that, who is the Veneta Crime Watch Group? The Veneta Crime Watch Group is an active group of citizens in the Fern Ridge area. We have about 1,040 members to date. I think there's about 100 members being currently in the vetting process. All of our members are vetted. They're all adults. We have 3 current arms to the Veneta Crime Watch Group. Yes, one is social media, and that's how we all communicate quickly. The second arm is our group really spearheaded and put the volunteerism behind the growth in Neighborhood Watch and what we call a Fern Ridge Patrol Group for our area. And those are volunteers going out and patrolling and being additional eyes and ears for the Sheriff's Department. The third arm is the networking, and that is some of us who are working with the city, working with the Sheriff's Office, working with the county, and trying to learn and trying to see what's possible, which, frankly, it's the networking arm that has brought us to where we're at today. We're about to push the go button on a fourth arm, and that will be the Political Action Committee that will help us in support of the proposal. So having said that, we can jump into this.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Sergeant Billy Halverson. How I got involved in this is I'm the current supervisor for the municipal policing contracts with the cities of Veneta and Cresswell. So I've worked with Steve and his group immensely over the last year especially.
I would also like to add that the relationship between the community and the Sheriff's Department in the Fern Ridge area has never been stronger. This is a citizens initiative. We are looking at 2016, 17, and beyond. We are calling the proposed district the Fern Ridge Community Policing District. Here's what we believe is possible. 24/7 coverage with 2 deputies on duty within the district, bringing a school resource deputy to play in the 7 schools represented, putting a community service deputy to working with folks that are either getting community service from the court and or are working through the Fern Ridge Youth Corps, a full-time sergeant, obviously, to supervise the deputies. We have talked to the sheriff about contracting for 3 jail beds. We have talked to District Attorney Patty Perlow about a full-time deputy district attorney for the district. The rural patrol part is really critical. If you live on Perkins or Worthen or Vaughn Road or Knight Road or, any of the number of the large areas where there's lots of housing, lots of folks, virtually no rural patrol right now. We want to bring Cahoots west. We know they're active in Eugene and Springfield. I think Springfield is new, but we want to bring Cahoots into the district. We are developing the Fern Ridge Youth Corps. We want to have a citizens advisory group. We want to expand the Fern Ridge Patrol Group, which is active today. We want to continue expanding neighborhood watch groups. We want to continue promoting community policing, and we absolutely have to improve EMT response time, and you heard from Chief Nye on that. Well, you folks know better than we do what is a special district, but it's our understanding that the district that we're looking for, because it is policing, must be a district formed under Oregon 451, which means that county commissioners would be the governing body. Our ask on that is that the Citizens Advisory Committee be appointed by the county commissioners. Go ahead, Billy. Here is what we call in our group Revision 1, and I apologize, it's really hard to see, at least for me. There is a blue line around what is shaded in green. That represents the district as it stands today. By no means is this a final boundary. I'll ask Sergeant Halverson to explain why and how we came up with the district, and it's based on response times.
Basically, we started looking at what areas we needed to provide service to, what areas identified with the Fern Ridge area, the communities, and then narrowed that scope to response time by deputies. Within this area, using Veneta as kind of the hub, for the most part, a normal response is 15 minutes or less, which would mean an emergency response would theoretically be 10 minutes or less from Veneta to pretty much anywhere in that district.
Go ahead, Billy. So again, if you study the district as it is now, we do cover Crow, Veneta, Elmira, Notai, Walton, and Alvador. This is what we call the Fern Ridge communities. What do we need? Well, we need a lot more than we can afford. We know that. But let's talk about what we think is possible. We have to have rural patrol. We are creating a buffer zone for criminal activity. We know that. We need a deputy to be able to cover the entire district. And we also need to expand what we're doing inside the city. We need a valuable school resource deputy. We need a community service deputy. We need to hold folks accountable. We need deputy support and backup. You heard Commissioner Bozovich talk about the incident in Veneta over the weekend. We got lucky to have that trooper happen to be in the area. That's not common. We need improved EMT response time, and you heard from Chief Nye on that. Probably most important, we need to start helping youth and at-risk individuals. We need to reverse and curb the drug activity and crime. What we know is that we have a large heroin and meth problem. And we also know that that heroin and meth is coming right west into our community on 126. So 24/7 coverage, currently we don't have 24-hour coverage, we have 20-hour coverage. We need 2 deputies on duty at a time, plus the sergeant, plus those 2 resource deputies. How we're proposing to get there, we need the sheriff to provide 10 patrol deputies, plus 2 resource deputies, 1 for the schools, 1 for the community service piece. Those 2 can overlap and work with each other, and that should take care of us during times of vacation or illness. When we need the 1 full-time sergeant. Again, to continue, and we'll continue to expand neighborhood watch, the patrol group, the community policing activities. We're going to continue to try and find and add value for every district resident. Go ahead, Billy. Our communities are at high risk. There is no long-term federal, state, county, or local solutions developed or coming, at least not that I've heard you guys talk about yet. We virtually no coverage outside of Veneta city limits. We have 1 deputy on duty, only 20 hours per day, and only covering the Veneta city residents under that contract. Risk is high with no deputy backup and support, no school coverage, no resource deputy for K through 12, no community service or youth program for at-risk individuals, and we know we have a significant method error. This is how the contract works today. 1 deputy on duty, no backup. We have times when no deputy is on duty. We're only covered inside the city limits. We have nobody in the schools. It is true our contract is governed by the City of Veneta Council. No rural patrol. Go ahead, Billy. So we're building these safe zones for criminals. No rural deputy presence provides us a buffer zone for criminal activity, leaving a defendant myself mentality, provides poor data, crimes not being reported, no more taxes for more of the same. In other words, I think citizens in our area, residents of our area are done with business as usual. What's unique and interesting about our proposal is it's not business as usual. It's really directed, it's really built to answer and solve problems. We know that the schools are at risk. There's a high cost of vandalism and destruction to personal and public property. I don't know if any of you are aware that the Crow High School was recently vandalized, and it came at a great cost to them. Go ahead, Billy. Here's a good one. What if you had an active shooter at the Crow High School today? There's nobody out there that can respond to that, which means everybody would have to come out of Eugene, which means our response time would be at best 20 minutes. At UCC, it took 7 minutes to get 3 on site. One of those 3 was my brother-in-law. Drugs are being delivered directly to Elmira High School. We know that. And we've continued to talk about how valuable it is to have a deputy backup. There are any number of schools in the district with little protection. And that's not limited to the high school. We also know that we track drugs going into the middle schools now. If we have an active shooter at the Crow High School, we wait. This is really just about saying enough is enough. We like the fact also that this is a citizen-driven initiative because we want to address problems. We want to address the impact of meth and heroin in Lane County. Go ahead. But we also want to talk about the development and accountability of young residents. Go ahead, Billy. That's why, if we look at at-risk youth, and we admit that drugs are infecting our communities and taking value away from our properties, the responsibility is saying enough is enough. We want to find a mechanism for community service and empowerment, opportunity and choices. We want to have an effect in changing trends. We can't make our county friendly turf. We think we can have an impact on valuable graduate and school retention rates. So I'll introduce to you Fern Ridge Youth Corps, supervised by that 1 resource deputy, with the help of resident volunteers, a citizen board of directors, set up as a nonprofit. We would welcome ages 13 to 19, 3 ways to join. First way is identified at-risk youth by that school resource deputy. Second way would be a parent-guardian enrollment. Also would include a self-enrollment. And of course, the third way is court-ordered. If you come into town, the DA may not have the means to prosecute you, but she certainly has the means to direct you to community service. Go ahead, Billy. And just as a side note, Sergeant Halverson and I are meeting with the district's attorney's office to discuss and put more around the community service piece today. The Youth Corps will provide opportunities for Fern Ridge area teens to develop a sense of community involvement through personal accomplishment, teamwork, and service to the county. Participants aged 13 to 19 will be completing projects for the Fern Ridge community's rural environment and towns. Corps members will benefit by learning strong work habits, new skills, and the value of environmental and civic stewardship. County departments, municipalities, towns benefit from the maintenance tasks and tangible outcomes such as new trails and other projects around the Fern Ridge district. Go ahead, Bill. You have the court-ordered piece, and that will be what we will be utilizing as the Sheriff's Work Crew program for that. Go ahead, Billy. We want to incorporate a trade for grades component. We recognize that some of our students need to focus more on doing better in school. They may need the Youth Corps in a significant way. They may need the benefits of participating in the Youth Corps, but trading qualifying hours of community service for work study, we think we can achieve the same thing. Continuation of trade for grades would be result-based, depending on the cooperation of the school, the student, the parent guardian, and that resource deputy, and we have to set benchmarks for each individual. After completing a successful community service program, Youth Corps members can qualify for paid internships, valuable workforce training. They could continue on in education, LCC, trade school, and we would do that via corporate partners and grants. Work crew ordered member could be placed in a more progressive Youth Corps service if the resource deputy sees something that he thinks perhaps is salvageable in a young individual. And why that's important is because, you know, the premise of this is to get kids to see that there's something that they can work for. If you put time into the county, if you put time into your community, if you work with the resource officers, if you work with the community volunteers, there's something at the end of that for you. We made a lot of progress out in Veneta over the last year in our partnership with not just the city of Veneta, the development of the Fern Ridge Patrol Group, and relationship with Lane County Sheriff's Office. But what our group is saying is it can't be enough. We've got to go rural. The Fern Ridge Community Policing District would contract 3 jail beds at the Lane County Jail. That stops you're going to go into town, but you'll be back tomorrow. Lane County Sheriff's Office currently contracts jail beds with both Eugene and Springfield, and we would just follow similar contract. District would have 1 full-time deputy district attorney assigned. With that, we want to expand the use of community service for capacity-based releases, which has been an ongoing problem in Lane County, and pretrial services release. Go ahead, Billy. Well, we all know how things are paid, and we know we're looking at a permanent tax rate. I will announce today that we do have some numbers preliminarily. I got last night late from the county tax manager. Those need to be studied by our group. We are working with the Sheriff's Office and others in our group to see if revision 1 is enough, or do we need to look at revision 2. We're pleased with the numbers to date. But I will also say that until we have had a chance to do a thorough evaluation, we're not prepared to say that we're there yet and announce what the cost of the program will be. I will only say that the numbers are looking very positive. Go ahead. Here's the estimate of what's needed. You'll note, Commissioners, that in 2016, 2017, the number's quite low. Well, that's because we have to give the Sheriff's Department time for ramp up. By 2017, we would be fully loaded, and that reflects that 2.7 number. Go ahead, Billy. Startup costs, the county, Bonita Crime Watch Group, Cahoots, and what we're looking at and discussing with our city is the need for, or the additional need for a substation, because, we're going from, a small room at City Hall to now we got a whole lot of deputies to house. These are just sums. Go ahead, Bill. Future cuts versus population growth. What's happening in Lane County is we're continuing to grow, but we're continuing to not have enough money to take care of folks. In our area alone, I think there's something like another 100 or 200 houses about to get put up. So we really want to stay focused on, how do we move forward? The population in Veneta area is expected to double in the coming years. And are we ready for that? Are we prepared for that? What we do today will shape that growth. Go ahead, Billy. We've all heard about lost timber. So I grew up in Lane County, specifically in the Springfield area. And I remember what the Sheriff's Department looked like back in the 70s. And obviously we're living through what it looks like today. So we've gone from $56 million to $4.7 million from the general fund to support the sheriff. There's the picture. Purple is where we sit. Go ahead, Billy. Demand what you pay for in value. So who's in control? I'm going to argue that the citizens and taxpayers of this district are in control. We do desperately need that Citizens Advisory Board. We desperately need to continue our work with the Sheriff's Office. We understand that this has to be governed by the Board of Commissioners. How does it work? Under a long-term contract with the Sheriff's Office. How is it funded? It is a permanent tax rate. So for those who don't yet know, that cannot be changed without it being voted upon. Go ahead, Billy. Moving forward, if we support this, we get 24-hour coverage within the district, 2 deputies on duty. We get rural roads neighbors covered. We get response, not a letter in the mail. We're deterring crime. We're putting pressure on that criminal activity. Quite frankly, the drugs coming up 126 or over 126. We get a DA engaged under the agreement for community service offenders. We put that valuable resource deputy in the school. We expand the drug enforcement. We have the jail beds. We're ready for community growth. We now have a voice and what we think is a very, very important Fern Ridge Youth Corps. Go ahead, Billy. Ramp up for coverage. I'm going to let Sergeant Halverson talk to you about how we get ramped up. Go ahead, Bill.
So part of the proposal that we've talked about is that if the district was in place, the existing Bonita contract deputies would be absorbed into that. So you have initial go with 5 deputies in there. Because of training and things like that, it's going to take some time to build up to that final number of 13 total. We're looking at a year's process for that. The hope is also that there are other opportunities. If the Sheriff's Office has dedicated stable funding, then that opens the door for other certified police officers that already have training and experience that would like to work for the Sheriff's Office but just are afraid to commit with the uncertainty of the budget. So what we've projected into this is planning for that year ramp up to get up to full speed.
The jail would be, obviously that would be a right-of-way deal. The DA would be a right-of-way deal. So what are our final steps? we've already announced and are planning for town hall meetings. We know that Thursday night at the Fern Ridge Middle School, we expect a packed cafeteria. We have a meeting tonight in Walton. We're doing Applegate Elementary School tomorrow night. And the next 2 weeks, we have very, very busy with, as Liz said, 6 to 8 different meetings. We're just about ready for the go button on the PAC. We're waiting for the state of Oregon to send back the EIN, and then we'll get the bank account launched and we'll hit the go button. We're going to continue to use social media. We're working with a consultant to talk about how we work with professional media, although we prefer to talk to the residents so that they get the story directly from us, and so that's our focus. We do have some endorsements, and we're working on some joint statements. You're already hearing from some folks. I can tell you with certainty, in listening and talking to all of the people in our group, we're getting a ton of response. We're getting a ton of positive response. We're getting people's attention all over the county and beyond. You can see Creswell has a large contingent here today, and there's a reason for that. It's time to start talking about what we need and then figuring out a way to get there. Go ahead, Billy. Whew. With that, I'll answer, or if I can't answer, somebody in our group probably can, but we'll answer any questions that you might have.
So I'm going to start out first by saying thank you to the City of Creswell for the PSU study, because I do believe that was the basis of a lot of the work that this group did. So that they read your study, if you don't recognize some of the elements in here. Also, I just want to ask Steve and staff real quick. The PowerPoint will be available on our website. Imagine after this meeting, we generally do that. I saw people taking pictures of the screen that generally don't come out well. So don't worry, you'll be able to get the PowerPoint later. Also, our meetings are available on the internet and archives, so you can go back and watch this. Folks that were, trying to record things and all that, so don't worry. So with that, we'll move on to questions, and I have Commissioner Liken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, good presentation. Really appreciate it. A couple questions I have, and so it is what I would call an ambitious plan, and which I commend you. I think it needs to be an ambitious plan. But with saying that, some of my experience will show if you put together an entire Christmas tree, you may have challenges. So have you taken maybe some of or has your group kind of taken the ambitious plan and maybe broken it up to top priority, middle priority, maybe a lower priority type of thing, so that maybe if and depending on your consultants you're working with in the narrative that you're going to present, have you kind of broken it up in those stages, or are you looking at we're just going to go for the whole thing and see what happens?
Because this is a citizen-driven initiative, let me back up. So I hope you heard me say that nothing here is cast in stone. Because this is a citizen-driven initiative, we really want to hear from more and more folks. Mm-hmm. That's why the town halls, right? So these are things that we've identified are needs, but it's all very much so fluid still.
Yep.
So we'll learn as we go. Like we'll learn just how much support we'll get from you folks. We do have, I think, overwhelming strong support for one area that is it's become clear to us this is non-negotiable, and that's the resource officers in the schools. People are really, really worried about these schools out there unprotected.
Well, I was actually born and raised in Roseburg. And in fact, my family, I have a very deep connection with Umpqua Community College. And I think UCC was in the same situation. They were just very fortunate that two Roseburg detectives happened to be out there and the OSP. If they were relying on Douglas County, I'm not sure what the time would have been for them to get there. So I think that also, I think, resonates where you're mentioning with Crow. The other piece I saw was how the district is that you're proposing to be set up. So I would call it not a pure special district, kind of a hybrid form is what it looks like. I see that there's a certain attorney in sitting back here that I really view him as really the best special districts attorney maybe in the state of Oregon. That's Ken Jones. And so I would highly, highly recommend you continue to work with him if you are already. And I've known Ken for years, and I respect him highly. He probably understands special districts as well as anybody there is in the state of Oregon. And then, of course, Len Goodwin, I worked with for 17 years, also as a highly respected attorney that lives in your area too, and I know him quite well. And so I think you have some, from the legal perspective, some good folks here that will work with you on how you want to move forward on this. But I really want to just finally say I highly commend you on how you're approaching this. I think this citizen-driven way is so important to have this kind of success. And as you move forward and as you have your town halls, I would look at to see what areas are really resonating with the citizens, maybe put a bit more of a focus on those, and because you always have the opportunity to come back into the future to add things if that's where you want to go. So thanks for the presentation. That's just the comments I have at this point in time. I'm very supportive of what you're trying to accomplish here. So great.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'll only add that, our focus right now is understanding this has to be affordable.
Yep.
And we get that.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, thanks for the great presentation today and all your, I'm sure, volunteers that are helping you put this together. This is something that I'm very excited about. We've, in my district, we've tried this, or there's been a lot of different conversations on how to improve public safety. In fact, the Dexter Lowell area was looking at something similar to this. It just never could get quite off the ground and get to the request point for the board. I know that Cresswell has really been studying this and how to move forward and improving their public safety. So I'm excited that, this is a proposal that I believe, like I said, really is, covers or has all the ingredients to make a difference in the public safety system in this area. And the exciting piece is if you can get it passed, or when it passes and it can get implemented, we're going to be able to document the results and be able to present those and make a very strong case that maybe the next stop is Cresswell, maybe the stop after that is the Lowell area, maybe it's Cottage Grove. This can be duplicated, so I'm very supportive of it. So I kind of want to get down to, I want to know exactly what your request is of us today so that we can, talk about that and we can move forward. So I'd like to know, are you shooting for a May election? Understand, as somebody that worked closely with the Round River Water District to form the water district, it's complicated, and what's it going to take to be prepared to ship it to the ballot? So can you help me understand what you're really wanting from us?
Yeah. So I think the first ask is we need the county commissioners to direct staff to open up some resources and time and to work with our group to get things taken care of. And of course, the first big hurdle is understanding the timeline which Steve Dingell's office will need to establish for us to get things done. We are shooting for having this on the ballot in May. We do believe we will have the support to get that to get a favorable outcome, but there is a lot of work to do. Commissioner, you're right. There's time to do it. We need to probably have that ballot drafted sometime in December, but we need to go from this meeting to ramping up another 200 or 300 miles an hour and start pouring into a lot of detail. And we can't get there. We can't get to some of the answers that we need without direction from you to city or to county staff to help us out.
Okay. You know, I wish my memory was, you know, photographic and I can remember the exact cost we had before, but, you know, I don't know, maybe the administrator knows, but, you know, I'm thinking that the county spent probably a minimum of $40,000 helping get the Raw River Water District up and going, and that didn't include a vote. So, you know, are we still fairly close, Mr. Mokahiski, or do you have an idea of what this might entail for costs or county involvement?
You know, what I can tell you is we know because we looked at the, and it's escaping me now, the Lane, is it LECD education group that,
ESD, yeah.
ESD, thank you. Lane ESD cost for their election last May was about $80,000. So I think, you know, it's conceivable it would be under $100,000, but it depends on the extent of the services that are requested. So just for the election piece, and then, you know, the other piece is the legal costs that could be associated with some of the work. I think that's what's unknown at this stage.
Okay, thanks.
I have Commissioner Farr in the queue and then Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you, Chair Bozovich. You know, I'm pretty excited about this for a number of reasons. The first thing's already been mentioned. You guys have done your homework on this. You've clearly identified a lot of the conditions that I'd alluded to earlier, conditions that would make it difficult to move forward. You talked about having a full-time DA. I think that's tremendous. You know, that's a large part of having a local district such as the one that you're prescribing, is being able to follow through with the work that the patrol and enforcement officers provide. So that's one of the big steps, having 3 jail beds. You talked about not sending people downtown and then sending them right back home again, or right back into the community. So you really are addressing a lot of the concerns that I may have had had I studied it a little bit more. But you've really crossed the T's and dotted the I's on that. I'm really excited about hearing more about it. You know, I think back in 1993, I joined the Bethel School Board. Right about that time, Measure 5 was taking effect. And what Measure 5 did, it did a lot of things, but one thing it did, it took away local control from how schools operate locally, where people in the district choose the services that they want to pay for. Well, this is an effort to restore some of that local control, where the people inside of the district choose the services that they want to pay for, and they pay for those services. And I think by and large, you're going to get tremendous response from the people inside of the district, because you've painted to me a picture of the services that are already being provided and that are lacking. You know, you talk about 24/7 coverage with a deputy on duty with 10-minute response. That's, you know, talk to the people just outside of the city limits. How big is that going to be to them? Really a fantastic selling point. So as you move forward with this, I want you to count on me as a facilitator. I will help clear the way to get things moving, to get you toward a May ballot. I think it's important that you strike while the iron's hot. You have some folks here who are really engaged. Keep them engaged. Get them engaged right to the finish line at this point in time, and do the due diligence. And Commissioner Bozovich, of course, is the commissioner who represents your area predominantly. I believe it probably does lapping into East Lane County just a little bit, or is it entirely East Lane County? So you know, he's obviously your first line of response, but count on me as a facilitator. You know, Crow High School is closer to my house than South Eugene High School. It takes me it's about 11 miles to drive from my house to South Eugene. It's less than 9 miles for me to drive to Crow. So I have a vested interest in what happens just beyond my doorstep. So keep me informed, keep us all informed, and I wish you the best of luck. This is a great step toward, as Commissioner Stewart mentioned, not just your community, but potentially to Cresswell and to Cottage Grove and to Lowell and other communities in Lane County. You know, we're talking about the deputies being stretched thin, a county almost the size of Connecticut. Well, this breaks it down into little cells a little bit more directly, where people can count on 10-minute response. Whereas today, as you said, if there was an active shooter at Crow High School, 20 minutes would be a pretty fast response. I don't know that it would be that fast. And as we think about the type of tragedy that occurred at Umpqua Community College, that had occurred at Thurston High School and other places around the nation, fast response, no matter what we do to deter people from having the weapons, no matter what we do to deter people from falling into the mental health, behavioral disorders that cause that kind of activity. Things like that potentially do happen as long as there are guns out there, and there are, and as long as there are people out there who aren't getting the behavioral health services that they deserve and need, and as long as the state isn't funding our efforts locally, then doing it locally, taking the initiative on a local basis is going to be the way we have to do it. So thank you very much for bringing this forward, and I'm excited. I want to hear more.
Great. I wanted to address one piece real quickly, and that is, myself included, I don't personally know a household in the Front Ridge area that doesn't have a gun. But I think one of the things that our group is really focused on and really excited about is the mental health piece. You know, and we're hearing about that. You turn the news on and you hear everybody's got an answer about the gun debate, but nobody really has come forward with a solid answer on the mental health piece. I think incorporating Cahoots into our model here is at least a step in the right direction.
And I trust that you've been in contact with Cahoots. It's a fairly big bite that you're asking for a contribution for the startup from Cahoots.
Well, they need a van.
They need a van.
Yeah, so
I've been a part of providing vans to Cahoots. Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I guess a couple of things come to mind that you might look into. I don't know if these ideas will help you, but they're intended to be constructive. The first is we've had some conversation around this table about what the ongoing costs are for Lane County Sheriff's deputies, and in particular, the tremendous amount of money involved in the recruitment process, the training process, and then the ongoing training responsibilities. So be thinking about the idea of having your uniform sworn officer component fully fully paid for. You don't want to be in this situation in future years where other boards say, wait a minute, the amount of money we're paying on these deputies that we're getting paid by this district is sufficiently low. We need to change that arrangement, and then you get a drop in service. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the full roll-up costs for the sergeant and any of the uniformed officers that you're going to have a contract with the county on. Now, with regard to schools, keep in mind that Oregon's current property tax system, the one that we're all under unless there's going to be a constitutional amendment to change it, makes a clear difference between taxes for schools and taxes for government. Government would be things like Lane County, City of Eugene, Fire District, Library District. Schools would be things like Lane Community College, ESD, and your local school districts. So be careful about blending a public school function and being under the public school cap for taxes as opposed to government. And government has a higher cap than schools typically. And that leads me to another related point, which is work with Mike Coles of our assessment taxation, because he's really an expert on those issues. Now, back to the school thing. Other communities in the state of Oregon have successfully navigated that by using the term youth as opposed to school. So a youth officer puts you under the government. A school officer may put you under school. So you might want to use the language that will get you over there. Another idea that worked well in our county measure that was put out to the voters was a requirement that the funding be scrutinized with an annual audit of the funds that were used. That's proven effective, at least in the polling that was done on our transportation measure. People liked that part of it. They voted no on the transportation measure. But they did like the part where we said there will be an annual audit of the funds that are, taxed for this purpose, and then this district would have an independent audit of how those funds are used. And that way, you have an ongoing check on making sure that the funds are used for the purposes for which you've established the district, and that for those people that are, let's say, critical, even hypercritical, maybe even untrustworthy, that the funding would be used for some other purpose. It allows you to say, and by the way, we are making sure that these funds are used solely for the purpose for which they're being authorized, and it's an ongoing annual requirement to have an auditor look over how the money was used and to certify that it's been used for the proper purpose. I think that's a great way of ensuring some accountability in the way the money's used. Another thing is, I think that and this may be more of a bigger picture issue, is the Special Districts Association does provide resources to people that want to form special districts. And I don't really know, and this is something that in my deep background, I was a lawyer for a special district, and the Special Districts Association was very helpful to me in that role of being an attorney for a special district. I don't really know if what you're thinking about is in fact a special district or it's a county district within a county government. Not really sure. And so to the extent that you could form your own special district and have your own elections for your own board of directors to your own special district and establish a base, a tax base for that special district, and then make contracts with Lane County, Cahoots, or whatever, as opposed to being formed as a county district within Lane County and having the Board of Commissioners be the people that are legally obligated to do what the district members want done. I know that at one point in one of our public safety crises in the more recent past, that proposal was being floated to form these districts, and I think Commissioner Stewart may know a lot more about this than I do, but my sense is that that is an option for you to consider. Typically, counties and county sheriffs have not been in favor of doing that because they want to make sure that law enforcement, jails, district attorney function fall under county government. But I'm just raising that as an issue as you try to answer questions from the public about why you're going in the direction you're going. And then I think that because the timeline, I like your optimism, there's a lot of work to be done, but there's time to do it. I really like the idea of like accelerating this because I think there are unintended problems down the road, and we want to make sure that we get the voters pamphlet, we get the public awareness of it, that we get the buy-in from as many people as possible. And in terms of any other advice or things to think about, the sooner you can start quantifying these things like the cost of these deputies, the cost of these youth resource officers, the cost of your Cahoots van, the cost for one DA, the cost for 3 jail beds, all these things that you're adding up. As soon as you can come to a dollar amount and then you've got a boundary, then Mike can start providing you with information on what the base is going to be. And another thing is, you mentioned in your presentation that the amount of the base cannot be changed except by a vote of the people. I think that's actually incorrect. Under Oregon's Constitution, once that base is established, once the base is established for a special district, a county, a city, that's frozen. That's not something the base can't go up. It's what can go up is that the governing body can make a referral for a 5-year operating levy, or they can make a referral for a bond. But they can't change the base. The base is what the base is, and our base has been frozen. So that's one of the problems with existing governments as opposed to creating a new government. So I would encourage you to be as knowledgeable as you can. And in fact, if anything I've said here today is incorrect, I'd like you to come back and say, we looked into that and you need to understand this or that. Last but not least is that I also agree with Commissioner Lycan that the problem we've seen in some of our own previous measures where we've put on that Christmas tree and hung a lot of ornaments on that Christmas tree and said, here it is, folks. It's the most beautiful Christmas tree that could ever be designed, and it's up to you. And they slam it down. Where if we give them the stripped-down version of the Christmas tree that appears to accommodate what it is they need at that moment, we tend to see more approvals. And last but not least, I'll refer you to the Oregon Association of Oregon Counties website, because in the last election, in the May 2015 election, there were a number of smaller counties throughout the state that put public safety measures on their county ballots. So these are county-wide ballots of various kinds, either construction, bonding, or 5-year operating levies. And a number of them passed, a number of them did not. And I would encourage you to think about what's a common theme in the ones that passed and what's a common theme in the ones that didn't pass. And I'm really excited about what you're doing, and I hope I haven't laid on more complications than you wanted. But I'm really glad to hear you're moving on, and I hope that you'll continue working with Ms. Perlow and Commissioner Bozovich and Mr. Coles and other elected officials that have been through this, or at least partially through this, and can give you some more feedback. And I remain supportive of what you're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, we want to stay focused on working on the needs and delivering a result. We can't do that with getting at some answers, which, we need the county staff to be working with the city staff, to be working with the citizens groups to get the fruit growing on the tree. What this looks like when we come to May 17th, I think it is, when we all vote, we'll see. We're going to hold firm to, there are some things that we know we need that shouldn't be negotiable, but there are a lot of other things that perhaps we just haven't learned yet.
So I have a couple questions and comments. I will note for Commissioner Sorensen that, ORS 198 provides for the formation of districts, but under that's purely about formation. There has to be another operating statute that specifically does it for that cause. Whether it's a irrigation district or a library district, there's another section of ORS that does that. And in particular for law enforcement, that is ORS 451 has that function underneath of it, and ORS 451 is county service districts. So really the only functional opportunity to form this district is under ORS 451, which makes it a county service district. It's still kind of technically under the law a special district, but and Ken will probably jump up and down because I'm kind of trying to very much trivialize that, but that's where it comes from. That's where it's a county service district, and why they're doing that versus what you would typically think of as a special district, which would be citizens from that local area on the board, and just like your local, the Fern Ridge Library District, which most people in this area are familiar with. I want to note that one of the reasons why you're coming to ask us for help is this isn't really a non-complex issue. I know you guys haven't retained legal counsel, partly because of expense issues and all that. Most of what you've done so far has been out of the pockets of the citizens involved, and there is the issue of how does the city of Veneta fit into this? Because they currently, the hope is that this district will take in the Veneta Patrol and supplement it. But that's going to have to require cooperation, and a city has to actively decide to be part of a county service district. We can't, by the vote of the people inside, and hopefully with the support of the council. So, there is a lot of moving parts. How does that work? How does the, if we are going to have this district supply patrol within the city, how does the city's current patrol funding transfer into that district? Is it a reduction in their permanent rate? How does that all work out? Lots of legal questions and administrative questions that have to be answered. Now, I was there at the City of Veneta's council meeting on the 12th, but I just would give you an opportunity to paraphrase that you do have, the city has already taken positive action to direct staff to work with you and the county. Is that correct?
Thank you for letting me address this, because I think it's, I know that our mayor is here, and so is our city administrator. We presented to the City of Veneta last week. What we can say is that the City Council gave us a consensus vote, and that was to move forward with continuing to find answers. So they're working with us, just as I'm asking the county to work with us to continue to find answers. Now, having said that, we've all been studying the various structures of the district. And to date, my answer has been there's probably more ways to structure this district than there are thought of. Some folks have wanted to look at Deschutes County, and Deschutes County is a very unique district because they've got a bunch of cities with their own police forces, and it's a really broken up model. What I would continue to say is this is unique. This is very different. And how we set that up, I'm less concerned with than getting the result. So I will let the cities and the county and the attorneys and the staffs and all of that help us find the correct path and the correct structure. And I would encourage the county's staff to work with our City of Veneta staff to bring forward solutions. But our group will stay focused on delivering the result.
All right, and as I see we're getting very close to another time certain, I'll just ask one final question. Do you know how many active neighborhood watches there were within the City of Veneta and the surrounding area in 2013?
0.
How many are there now, thanks to your group?
9.
That's an impressive thing. That's a huge change in that area that these citizens have already done. And I just wanted to give you guys a chance to pat yourselves on the back a little bit. That's quite a difference, having 9 active neighborhood watches now from 0 in a year.
That includes the Fern Ridge Patrol Group.
Yep. So I really appreciate that. So Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. As the conversation from the different commissioners come out, we've had Commissioner Sorensen, who's had many, many years of experience, and myself a few, and others, and had lots of different experiences. So we have a lot of ideas and a lot of effort, but what I don't want those ideas to do is to suppress or discourage the movement forward. So, because I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to improve, to create a new model, and us to improve public safety in Lane County. It's a small step forward, and I want to see the board supportive of it. So what I'd like to do is make a motion to direct the administrator to work with the Veneta Crime Watch and the City of Veneta in preparing a proposed Fern Ridge Public Safety District as presented today.
Second.
And also request that we receive monthly updates for progress to where we can give input.
I take it the second's okay with the remainder of the motion? So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Commissioner Lyken.
Very quickly, first of all, Commissioner Stewart, thank you for the motion. I think what this is going to do, because I think what this has got a lot of moving parts, a lot of legal minds are going to have to sit down. This direction now begins to move us forward on that. So we get our legal team involved to begin looking for, because you're on a time frame. If you want to get it out by May, we're on a time frame of when we can have the public process, the public hearings, in order to get this out on the ballot. So, Commissioner Stewart, great motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Yep, and thank you to the rest of the group. So that brings us to our 11 o'clock time certain item, which is a report and update on the Willamette Confluence Project. And I think we've got Dan Bell, the Willamette Basin Conservation Director for the Nature Conservancy, and Jason Knuckles from the Willamette Basin Program Manager for the Nature Conservancy. And I'll give a minute for the room to clear and settle down. If you guys can get it outside pretty quickly, I'd appreciate it.
They may not have heard you.
If we can clear the room quickly, I'd appreciate it.
Good. Thank you very, very much.
We'll give it just a minute here. I want you to have the full attention of the board. You can sit in the chair if you'd like. You don't have to stand at the podium. That was just Steve's preference. I'll give you the same. You missed the admonition to the previous speakers. These mics are very directional, and you have to get right up to them and aim them right at your mouth.
Okay.
And they're also our audio recording is our minutes. So if you don't speak in the mic, we lose it in our minutes.
All right.
All right, folks.
They weren't here for us.
That was a pretty heavy item right ahead of you, although your item's not any less important.
No. We'll lighten it up.
That's why I want to make sure we get everyone back here before we get started. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bell, and if you want to introduce the subject, and you've got our attention now.
Will do. So thank you very much, Commissioners, for allowing us to come and spend a little time talking today about the Nature Conservancy's project at the Willamette Confluence, formerly known as the Wildish property near Mount Pisgah. I've had the pleasure of addressing the board a few times now over the course of the last several years on this project. Particularly excited about this time because we get to share some of our success with you, talk about the trajectory, and a lot of things have been going on over the course of the last couple of years out on this property. Most of the slides are pictures, so as Jason suggested, we're going to lighten it up a little bit. My name is Dan Bell. I work with the Nature Conservancy. I'm the Willamette Basin Director for the Oregon chapter. With me is Jason Knuckles, who is based here in Eugene and does most of the project management related to the Confluence project. And so we're going to share some of the presentation here. I wanted to just, I think most of you were involved back in 2010 at the time that the Nature Conservancy acquired this property, but take just a minute to give you some background and kind of reorient you to the landscape out there. On the screen you can see the ownership of the Nature Conservancy surrounded there in the orange shading by other lands that are managed for conservation and recreation, including a series of lands on the north side of the Middle Fork with the Willamette Lane Parks District, of course Lane County's Howard Buford Recreation Area, and several smaller portions or properties owned by Oregon Parks and Recreation Department as part of the Willamette Greenway. Back in around 2007 or 2008, at the invitation of Lane County, the Nature Conservancy began conversations with the Wildish family about a possible purchase and permanent protection of this 1,271-acre property that sits right at the confluence of the Middle and Coast Forks of the Willamette. Those negotiations were interesting and eventually fruitful. In 2010, we were able to come to an agreement in terms with the Wildish family for the purchase of this property, and I particularly want to recognize Commissioner Stewart and former Commissioner Dwyer as really spearheading that effort at that time. We were able to not only work out the terms of an acquisition, but also the funding that was brought into play to purchase this property at that time. And since 2010, the Nature Conservancy has been very active out there, along with other partners, including the Friends of Beaufort Park, Willamette Lane Parks District, Lane County, and the entire Rivers to Ridges Coalition, as we have begun and launched our restoration of the property itself. You can see that as we were planning the floodplain restoration, and of course the prominent feature on this property are all of those former gravel pits, sites of gravel extraction through the period from the 1950s through the late 1980s. Representing about 20 gravel ponds on site when you include the Turtle Flats property owned by Friends of Beaufort Park. And of course, those are the distinguishing features within the floodplain and the primary target of our restoration activities. Starting on the right side of the screen here at the most upstream end of the Middle Fork Willamette is a project known to us as the Pudding Ponds Project. That is going to be the subject of most of Jason's conversation here in just a couple of moments, but that was the first phase of restoration that we implemented last summer. Moving ahead, we're going to be jumping down to the furthest downstream set of projects. What on this map is still identified as the Bring property and the Lower Coast Fork. Let's see if this works. So this set of two projects here. A project that crosses the ownership of the Nature Conservancy, the Friends of Beaufort Park, and Oregon Parks and Recreation Department to implement phase 2 of our restoration next summer, and then leaving phase 3 for this large area in the center on the Middle Fork, which really represents the most complex area of the site. Just for some perspective, this long revetment along the Middle Fork here is about 1.25 miles long, so that just gives you a sense of the amount of river frontage that we're working with and the area of ground that we'll be working with. That is currently slated for 2018, and I'll close with a little bit more of a looking ahead aspect of this. Before jumping into the particulars of the restoration project at Pudding Ponds, wanted to just share a couple of drawings that we have put together that try to articulate our vision for this property. What you see here is the current conditions as of 2012, and of course you'll notice all of the distinct gravel pond features on the property. Most of those obviously kind of irregularly shaped, very vertical banks with revetments or other berms that prevent a lot of interaction between the adjacent river and the floodplain that is represented on our property. Going ahead, this is an artistic representation of what we would like to see the property look like post-restoration. What you can see here is really that we have removed all of those gravel ponds, that they represent now features which are largely indistinguishable on the floodplain and provide avenues for water and other wildlife connectivity from the river onto our property. And again, that long revetment that I was referring to a little bit earlier, you can see in this area kind of a series of channels and connections to the river, to the Middle Fork Willamette River itself. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jason to allow him to just kind of walk you through the first phase, what we call that Pudding Ponds project, the most upstream portion of the property on the Middle Fork Willamette. And then I'll close with some further comments on the projects going forward and our role in those projects.
Both of these work?
Yeah.
So this is Pudding Ponds. Pudding Ponds project was named after a creek that's on the north side and the east side of Mount Pisgah. That's southern portion of that photo right there. Pudding Ponds is historically 3 ponds that were dug in the 70s and kind of abandoned in the 80s. They were some of the last ponds that were dug by the Wildish family. They had, quote unquote, naturalized over the last 30 years, and they were in pretty good condition. What they were lacking was that complexity and the connectivity to the river that Dan was mentioning as, big goals for the site. These ponds were still pretty deep, much shallower than we thought they could be. Very warm. They harbor bass and carp and a lot of non-native warm water fish species in there. And after 2.5, 3 years of design and engineering and modeling of the river right there, what we came up with was a design that would put an inlet into these ponds and an outlet out of these ponds. So, and thus we created a side channel to the Willamette. So 3,000 foot long side channel that parallels the Willamette River right there. For context, on the north side is Clearwater Park right there. So the mill race input for the mill race is right there at Clearwater Park as well. We worked with Willamette Lane and City of Springfield in these designs, and we were able to show that we would never receive water in these ponds before the mill race receives water, because there are water rights associated with the historic mill race, and we would show and prove that they get all of their water needs before we would ever take water out of these ponds. By connecting these ponds to the river and creating this side channel, we've also created waters of the state here. As soon as we moved water onto our property and connected it, we've created an island on our property, and now all of this is accessible to the public for fishing or boating or anything like that. All in all, we moved 40,000 cubic yards of soil here. And it was a pretty large restoration project for us. It's a lot of earth moving. You can see we took out 1 mile of road through these ponds. You can see how steep those banks were when we started there. And we created, by just grading those shorelines and taking out those hard features, a few more miles of complexity of these ponds. We were, I wouldn't say we planned it, but we did an oak restoration project at the exact same time. We didn't plan for these 2 projects to happen the same year, but we aligned these 2 projects in a way that a lot of the fir and all of the wood materials that we needed for the project, for the in-water structures, for the habitat features, the log jams and everything, came off of the site. So logs that we didn't sell to offset the oak restoration cost, we brought down onto the site. We also chipped all of our slash material and brought it down onto the site, and all the rock that we needed from the site we used. So this project, all in all, from a planning through implementation and monitoring and planting phases, it's about $1 million project. But in using on-site resources, nothing taken off, nothing brought on, we realized about $400,000 of the savings. The planting of the area was fairly significant. We put in about 70,000 trees and shrubs and about 80,000 emergent plants. About 10,000 willow stakes went onto the site. So planting was done by a local group called Oregon Woods. That feature on the right there you see was one of those habitat jams where logs are pressed into the soils and keyed in ways that they won't drift away, and that there'll be habitat for native salmon and such. This is the root wad of one of those trees. So there are hundreds and hundreds of these that are now underwater around these ponds, and these are the great hiding places that amphibians and fish and things need to use. So a couple of before and after pictures. We're facing west there. Down on the right is the Middle Fork. On the left is a series of the ponds. There's the old road that ran through the ponds. This is the haul road that was used to get the gravel off the site. So that entire road came out, and then you can see from linear features and kind of bathtub-looking sites, immediately after construction, you have a lot more complexity to the site, and that's where all of that planting took place out there. Go ahead. So So this is the inlet channel that was created, and this is directly across from Clearwater Park. As you're standing at the boat ramp there, you can almost see this feature. The gentleman, Philip Bales, is taking the photo, is there in the center of the picture with a small ultralight plane doing this low aerial imagery photography. We're in a monitoring phase now. We're looking at what type of connectivity we have over time. We expect the site to be flowing in excess of 200 days a year, but in fact this year we had really low flow conditions. We had connectivity all year round, so we have water moving in from the Middle Fork through these ponds year round. And then we're looking at the extent of the floodplain that's being connected to the site, and just how that floodplain forest habitat's going to grow. And it's a slow process, of course, growing all these things. Our water temperatures on the site dropped approximately 12 degrees in the ponds, so the water temperatures in these ponds now are exactly what the main channel of the river are. We have a huge western pond turtle and red-legged frog population out on these ponds, so all of those native fish and all the amphibians that we would expect to use the ponds are now in there. This is a critical area for rearing habitat juvenile salmonids. You know, all of our spawning takes place way upstream, but those juvenile salmonids have to have those places to get out of the flowing waters, out of that fast-moving river current, to feed and to just slow down. And this is the type of floodplain habitat that they really need, and that's what we've provided here. Some immediate results. This is the type of juvenile Chinook that you see in the ponds. They were using those habitat features the first time that we did sampling out there. What you find in the ponds is sometimes 1.5 to 2 times larger than you'll find in the river channel itself, just because of the amount of weight that they're able to gain in an off-channel habitat versus a river channel habitat. We have a side channel of about 3,000 feet long, and like I said, with just the complexity of shaping those ponds, we added another mile of shoreline onto the ponds, and then we planted about 130 acres across these ponds. That's it.
All right, thanks, Jason. So I wanted to bring it back to the map that we used earlier in the presentation. Again, just to make sure you're oriented, there's the Pudding Ponds project that we were just talking about furthest upstream. And then moving ahead, planned for the summer of 2016 with planting in the fall and winter of 2016 would be the comprehensive restoration of the Turtle Flats and our Lower Coast Fork site. Because of the nature of that section of the river, and of course it being on the Coast Fork, which is a much lower flowing river than the Middle Fork, that the features don't look so much like side channels, but more like backwater habitat. At times of higher water, you get inundation back into the series of ponds. We'll again be kind of breaching the haul road that moves through that section of the property, and knocking down berms and other revetments that limit some of the hydrologic connectivity between the confluence and the land features there. And then finally, in 2018, if all goes as planned, we would be approaching this large middle site, what we call the Lower Middle Fork, which again features that primarily, or with activities that primarily break the berms and revetments, kind of breach the berms and revetments right along the Middle Fork, and create the sort of shoreline and features that you saw in those earlier photos around some of these other ponds, as well as enhancing some off-channel features like this pond, which is too far away from the river to practically make sense to connect it, so we want to enhance that as a standalone water feature. So we were very happy with the success of our last project, very excited about the prospects going forward, and really interested in engaging and continuing to work with Lane County as we implement those projects with our partners. The last thing that I would mention, and again, those of you who were with the commission back in 2010 remember that the Nature Conservancy, of course, acquired this property, took ownership of this property
subject to conservation easements, which restrict its use, that are held by both Bonneville Power Administration and the Oregon Water Enhancement Board. But our intent was to complete the restoration and then transfer this property into public ownership. It is a site, not only because of the features on site, but also because of its location right at the proximity of Eugene and Springfield, that will provide tremendous public access and recreational opportunities once the restoration is complete. That is still our intent. We have not finalized anything as far as who that owner may be, but we still envision that at some point in time this will go to a public owner and it will be open to the public for compatible recreational use. With that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have on anything we mentioned or anything that we didn't mention, or go back to pictures if you want to stare at them a little bit longer. Before I do that, I would like to thank Alex Kyler for engaging us and setting this up, and again, appreciate your time today.
Commissioner Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. This is really good. When I served as mayor, I mean, there was a lot of conversation, and when we worked with Willamette Lane on the expansion of the bike trail. At one point, and I've been away from it a little bit here in the last few years, but at one point, Willamette Lane was really talking about maybe even expanding their connectivity. So is that something that's still ongoing? Is that a conversation that's still ongoing? Because the way and thank you for on the water rights issue in the mill race. I do remember, I was actually a city councilor when we went through that, so it's been a long time ago. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, I think, because that's an important piece. But with the mill race, the old Georgia Pacific Mill Pond, how that's been completely redeveloped in downtown Springfield, do you foresee maybe a continuing connectivity? Because and again, I can't think. I know Commissioner Stewart was highly involved in this, and like you mentioned, Commissioner Dwyer as well, and kind of helping to create this vision. But I think this vision can go beyond the kind of that rural area, because I think there's a real opportunity with Willamette Lane to continue that connectivity. So I don't know if there's those ongoing conversations or not, but which is something that I find actually very, very exciting, and as you move forward. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you again for the presentation.
Yeah. Yes, the conversations about connectivity and transportation through and around the site do continue. There have been conceptual maps that even showed a bridge over the Middle Fork connecting Clearwater to
I'm glad you said that.
over to Mount Pisgah. I would say, just as I always do when we're asked this question, and we do get asked it quite a bit, that there are restrictions in place via the conservation easements that you have to recognize, and that the acquisition itself was primarily for wildlife and salmon habitat. That being said, a lot of the conversation around that transportation corridor has really shifted to the Franklin Road corridor and opportunities to connect with Lane County Community College. So we continue to be involved in that. In fact, we were just talking about that prior to our time with you, with Alex and a couple of your other county staff. And so we, to the extent that we can, we are thinking about recreational and transportation opportunities in the course of our restoration activities, but of course those restoration activities are first and foremost. So.
And just
you'd like to add to that, Jason?
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So when we were talking about the vision, the mill race vision in downtown Springfield with the redevelopment of that Georgia Pacific Pond area, it was about well, first of all, it was about the flow and making sure you had that flow continue on, because there continues to be some industrial uses. But also, the conversation really was about a potential teaching area where you could teach about habitat, and teach about habitat that's coming right into an urban area like that, which I think was resonating not only with the elected leaders, but actually with schools, and really bringing kids out for a trip just to kind of check this out, knowing that you're still in this urban area, but yet you have this opportunity. That's why I asked that question, because I think a lot of this can go hand in hand. Well, recreation's a piece of that, but I also think this continued teaching on the habitat piece And just the habitat that's coming through downtown Springfield, through the mill race and through that area is pretty amazing at times. And so that's why I asked that question. I did, and I would just, I would just hopefully that dialogue will continue, because I think there's some really excellent opportunities here in the future. But again, great presentation. I really want to say thank you very much for all the work that you've and all the effort that's been put into this. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say that we agree with you that we think we can do all of these things. This is a great site with all of those opportunities in front of us.
Yeah, maybe that elevated bike path connection could be considered shade, and the foundations could be complexity to the currents and all that. It's all on how you classify it, right? That's right. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the great work you're doing. I really appreciate what you're doing, and as you probably know, we're involved with both a large events task force, and we're also involved with a parks master plan process. Specifically, have you guys made any comments on either of those two things, or are you kind of staying on your side of the fence, or what's your kind of attitude about all that?
Mike Russell has brought us along on the master plan for a long time now, and we had dialogue back and forth, and we added some comments to it, but our general comment back was that everything we saw in there that referenced this property was compatible with our future vision of it as well.
Okay. And then do you have anything else you'd like to add that you weren't able to get out in the course of your presentation or in the questions that you've been asked? Anything else that you'd like the public or us to know about this?
I think the site is huge. It's, I tell people this is the largest area in the Willamette Valley next to Finley National Wildlife Refuge, and this one just happens to sit right on the urban growth boundary as well. It's underutilized right now, and it's not as well known as it should be, probably in the area, and I think the future of it is amazing.
Yeah, I've mentioned to friends of mine who come from other parts of the country, and they see the Finley National Wildlife Refuge, and of course a lot of people in Eugene and Springfield don't even know where that is. And I said, well, we have an area that's actually closer and more diverse right here, and they're surprised to learn that. And I'm glad that this is coming to some fruition, and each time you come there's more information, you're putting more money into it, more energy. One final thing, Philip Bales is my next door neighbor, so I hear about this all the time.
I bet you do.
We love him.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Dan and Jason, thank you for the presentation. It's exciting to see the progress. I think when we embarked on this venture, from hearing the public loud and clear that they didn't want to see this, developed into home sites, that I'm glad we took the step and got a crack in the door, and you guys opened it up and was able to perform. So I appreciate that. And it's neat to hear about the Pudding Creek area. The temperature changes and the critical habitat for the salmonoids, and you're producing. Sometimes people question, do these things really work? Does it produce results? And it actually does. And I'm so thankful that you presented that today, so that we can, tell people, yeah, this is what we know has taken place, and the benefits. And I'm excited to hear, the next phase moving forward. Commissioner Sorensen and I were present last week at the celebration for, Friends of Buford Park's purchase of the ring site, and that's a critical component, as you've laid out today, to really seeing the big picture take place, and finding partners that can actually produce and move the vision forward is so critical in us making change. And you've been an incredible partner in making that happen. I'm excited to see the next phases. Do you know when, if you start in 2018 on phase 3, how long is that phase to complete? Is it a year phase, or?
Construction would take place over just one summer, and then planting would take place over a winter, and then we kind of get into a maintenance and monitoring phase for a year or two.
Yeah.
So, but we knock out pretty much all of the construction within a 90-day in-water work window.
So when you complete that and as you do your monitoring, you've talked about public access. Is that something that once you complete the work and you've met the requirements, then you'll try to see what's appropriate for public access, or is it a trail with some binoculars close by that you can take a look? Or have you thought about how that might actually take place?
So before I answer your question, Commissioner Stewart, I want to thank you again for the opportunity you gave us to get involved in this project. This is, I know for both Jason and myself, been a fascinating project to be involved in, and for our chapter and our organization, just some, pardon the pun, but some groundbreaking stuff here as far as floodplain restoration projects go, and the opportunity to work on these former aggregate sites. As it relates to recreation, again, under the terms of the conservation easements held by both Bonneville Power Administration and OWEB, the way that would have to work would be to develop a comprehensive recreation plan. And in that plan, you would identify everything from what sorts of uses to what does your trail network look like, what does access look like, where are those sort of points. That plan is then presented to those two entities for a review, and what they're doing is making sure that there are no violations of the conservation easement within any of the uses proposed. And once they approve that, then I'd say you're then ready to kind of open the gates and really start investing in the recreational infrastructure of the property. That hasn't been front and foremost on our mind, but as we continue to march towards 2018, it becomes more and more something that we're thinking about. And in many ways, you can appreciate that it would be highly beneficial to know who that landowner is going to be, so that we could do that along with that landowner. But we'll need to start thinking about what does the new footprint of the property, if you know what I mean. What is the, where's there water, where's there not water? Where do those opportunities exist on the property for access? Everything from fishing to hiking. And then developing that into a comprehensive plan, and hopefully that would integrate into the Howard Beaufort Recreation Area Master Plan and Lane County's overall parks plan as well.
So when you say recreation, and you just mentioned fishing and hiking, is that encompassed in that definition?
Yeah, the terms of the conservation easement specifically allow recreation as long as it's within an approved plan by those two entities.
So you'll define the level of recreation.
So they'll define. Now, there are some hard sideboards to keep in mind. There are things within the conservation easement that prevent new development, new buildings, impervious surfaces, no motorized vehicle, those sorts of things. So there are some sideboards within which you need to operate, but generally the term we use is low impact compatible recreation. Those sort of things like hiking, like fishing, would be entirely feasible on the property and consistent with conservation purposes.
Okay, so I appreciate that, because what I've learned on this board is that we need to have a clear understanding what the terms are that we're using, because recreation to me is completely different with somebody else, and I'm hopeful that the activities that take place here are educational, to show what good stewardship does, how we can we take a site that utilized products that were absolutely critical for our community to build and prosper and be there. But now that site's been able to transition back into, a new phase that is meeting a lot of requirements environmentally that we, as a good steward, we can do.
Yeah.
So I see an educational component and maybe some, real, I don't know, very light touch type other activities. So, that doesn't interfere, but still allows us to take this teaching moment, because it's hate to have a project like this and really not be able to communicate to the public the importance of it, and so close to our community that it can be a real gem. I mean, it is. So as you pointed out.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Now, one final question. You said that once it becomes, as my notes, I think was recognized for waters of the U.S. then it's open for fishing. So, I mean, technically right now,
The state.
waters of the state, sorry.
Waters of the
Waters
state,
of the
yeah.
state.
So when you connect to the main channel of the Middle Fork or the Coast Fork, it's a continuous water body at that point, and so it is waters of the state. So anywhere that we breach, right here, a side channel, that is this connection, this side channel is now part of the Middle Fork.
So picture, I mean,
So that is open
looks
to
pretty
that
small.
channel in the water.
And I'm thinking, okay, so if I was to hypothetically want to, fish in this area,
Float tube,
I'm going to have to
kayak,
float
canoe.
through that and in. And,
You can say it.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I was just wondering about access, being that now qualifies for that, what is the type of access?
Yeah, we inadvertently are opening up the site just through the restoration activities. Yeah.
And a good way to think about that, I've gone back to the diagram of that Pudding Ponds project, and we were just looking at the picture of the side channel created on the upstream end. A good way to think about that is that we've created a new island in the Middle Fork Willamette here, and because that's an island within the mean high water mark of the Middle Fork Willamette, that becomes open public water.
Okay, so you could actually float. I'm not trying to tell people what to do here, but I'm trying to grasp what the expectation is. So you could hypothetically float into that. You could get on that island and physically walk. Okay, and not be jeopardizing your project.
Okay. You might have some challenges getting out the downstream end because that's not as clear of a channel as the upstream end. But your premise is correct.
All right. Well, thanks again. Great work. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
I'm kind of glad he asked that question because I was just thinking about the next time I take a canoe trip, that might make a good campsite. No matter what happens here.
It's all good.
So, I go past Delta Ponds in my daily commute, constantly watch them year-round change. I was kind of happy to hear that you guys had flow even this summer, because one of the things I think they kind of got wrong in Delta Ponds is it looks like they don't get summertime flow hardly at all through that system, and I can't imagine what the temperature does in the summertime, and some of those are fairly shallow ponds. Not to mention they have the issue with the aquarium vegetation going on there. But so I was really glad to hear that. But it kind of brings up a couple. One of the things you mentioned is that is an inviting opening for a boater, and obviously there's not a very good exit channel to that. How well publicized is that in the fishing and drift boat community that this is not a place you want to just drift into with
It's not mapped or publicized anywhere, but I think anybody that has good river sense would know where their boat can go and not go. I wouldn't take a drift boat or a raft. I do both in that section. A kayak, a canoe, a float tube, that's more likely.
Yeah, and that's where a little bit of concern. We've had some water deaths this spring as the temperature warmed up and people weren't being aware that root wads move around in river channels and up and down the river and side to side, and weren't necessarily scouting the river first before they floated. I'm just kind of curious. What'd you guys do with those warm water species? Did you do something to kill them off before you cut the channel in, or did you just
Nope, under
assume
direction of
that the
ODFW and National Marine Fisheries Service, those are the exact same species that are in the river. What we've done is just create a habitat that they're less likely to breed in and less likely to survive in.
Okay,
so
so we weren't
colder waters.
introducing smallmouth into the Willamette by accident or anything?
No,
They're already
bass,
there.
carp,
Okay.
sunfish, that's the baseline in the Willamette nowadays. They're all there already.
Yeah, because I don't want to create the John Day down here or something like that. Well, that's interesting. So, the revetment that runs along the length of the larger section, is kind of interesting to me because that's protected and formed a distinct channel, and it looks like your long-term picture is a very braided system. Is there any concern about navigability after you guys create your braided system through that section of floodplain, or is that?
Well, that area right there was braided up until
the early 70s when Clean
When
Water
the
Act
was built, yeah.
and then that levee was put in. So, and that levee was put, basically down the middle of the river in that area. So it's a historic feature that has only been around 40 years or so. The upper end of that levee would stay in and be planted with riparian species and trees for shade and such, and to protect City of Springfield Utility Board's drinking water intake, which is directly across the river right there. So we have every intention of not moving the river away from the sub's intake area, but allowing for meander downstream.
That's great, and good to hear. So one final question. Are you familiar at all with the Washington State floodplain decision by the courts?
Not enough to answer a question in this setting.
I was just kind of wondering if you see some of the future of some of this. I know this particular one was in response to a BPA mitigation, but I'm thinking, ultimately, if that decision gets put in force in Oregon, we're going to have to deal with floodplain mitigation in a lot of ways in order to do economic development projects that impact floodplain. So I'm kind of thinking, is this the future of what we have to look at for counties and municipalities to look for opportunities like this to be those mitigation sites? And is it something that you see more of around here, or is this a rare thing where we have these cut off gravel pits and all that can be restored later?
Of course, we can't predict the future as far as where those rules may go. It is a good opportunity, I think, to just reiterate the entirely voluntary nature of this project, all the way from buying willing seller, willing buyer transaction. All of the funding is thus far has been through a series of public and private grants or private donations to the project. So I would say that there are probably two different models, and we certainly would hope that the voluntary, proactive model that we're employing here doesn't go away if the ground rules change on floodplains.
Thank you. So any further questions?
Thank you very much again for the time. Any other opportunity in the future where you'd like to hear more about the project, we're happy to come in and talk to you again.
Really appreciate the update, and I think I'm going to have to get my canoe out this summer.
Great. Thanks. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the satellite map from Google Maps right now, and it looks like some of the restorations aren't showing on the actual picture that's on board. When did the inlet was dug? When
The first Pudding Ponds project was implemented in summer 2014.
2014. So a very old picture here then. Okay, good.
It's just a year old.
Just a year old.
So.
And I took a tour out there maybe a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So when a lot of the stuff was being...
It's time for another one.
Exactly. Maybe a self-guided one. There was maybe this came up during the moments that I was gone, but is it a Japanese... What is the
knotweed? There's Japanese knotweed.
Knotweed, yeah. And is that what the other efforts to stem that?
There are efforts. There are a lot of watershed councils and land trusts. I think it's on everybody's radar. We spent a decade in the Sandy River dealing with a problem that had gotten out of hand before early detection was taking place up there. So early detection, rapid response is the way to go here in the Upper Willamette.
Right on. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. So that gets us down back to Commissioner's business and agenda team request and work session request. Any agenda team or work session requests from the board? So I just want to take a moment to note for the board, we have a work session scheduled tomorrow. And I know that, unfortunately, Commissioner Lycan is going to be absent, but he'll be attending a Tracktown USA event, that's critical for economic development for the region and the county. So, it's an excused absence. But I will note to the board that we are going to regularly schedule Wednesday work sessions and to try and when you can, hold that open, but I do understand that not every organization follows the board's calendar, and with that, I may end up being absent from a regular board meeting in November because the state has scheduled a statewide meeting on November 10th on the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program relative to the new prison forecast and the impacts of that. And they consider it important enough that they're paying for hotel rooms for people from Eastern Oregon to attend. I think it's important as the board's representative to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, I may need to be there, so we'll have to see how that plays out. So I do understand when a board member does have to miss a work session, but just keep in mind that work sessions also happen on Wednesdays, and to try and keep your Wednesday calendars open when you can. With that, we don't have need for executive session. And we'll do a review of assignments after our afternoon session. If there's no other business this morning, I'm going to recess the meeting, and we'll come back into session at 1:30. So we are recessed.